Overshadowed by giants, one predator reigned supreme in the late Jurassic of China. While the world remembers the Allosaurus, the East had its own super predator, Yangchuanosaurus. This was the uncrowned king of the Jurassic, an apex predator with a massive skull and a specialized anatomy, allowing it to hunt even the largest of sauropods. Today I'm bringing this lost ruler back to life. This is the complete reconstruction of a Yangchuanosaurus, from scientific data and graphs to a fully functional 3D model. To achieve this level of detail, I'm not just pushing geometry around. I'm using a foolproof pipeline and Blender to ensure every scale, muscle and bony landmark follows the latest paleontological research, from the distinct skull shape to the complex scale placement. Let's break down the technical workflow that made this reconstruction possible. First thing first, bringing the reference. I prefer to use this multi-skeletal view so that I can have a better perspective what the dinosaur actually looked like. The blockout stage is actually one of the most important ones. Here is where you capture the core features of the Yangchuanosaurus. In this stage I also pay a lot of attention to the silhouette and the general shape. I really want to stress this because it's very important. If you pay attention to the Yangchuanosaurus spines, you might notice they are slightly elongated. It's because it's part of the family called Retopologise, which translate moderately spined lizards. Some of the body parts that I create here are done using skin modifier, curves, or sometimes even modeling, as here for the fingers. So the rule here is pretty simple. The widest parts are around the joints and the thinnest are around the phalanges. So I pretty much use this rule here, and it's a common thing for all of the, or almost all of the vertebrates. The feet are what makes or breaks the dinosaur. I prefer to start with the modeling workflow. I model over the reference and I make sure that the side fingers are actually smaller than the middle one. And also, since you make the side fingers smaller, there's that thing that they do not touch to the ground, so make sure that they do have contact with the ground, although it doesn't really exist here, but it will in the future. The last big blockout piece is this skin flappy thing that connects the leg and the torso, which just gives a more natural look. The skull is pretty difficult to do because you're trying to find a balance between showing where the main holes of the skull are, at the same time not trying to create a crazy shrink wrap, which can actually be done pretty easily, so keep an eye for that. Here I am also adding these small rugosed keratin pieces that would grow onto the Yangchuanosaurus head. Now I'm smoothing very slightly. Then I add the jaw muscles that allow this dinosaur to open and close its mouth. And then it's time for the long and serrated teeth that would allow our dinosaur to kill the local fauna, which would most likely be Yangchuanosaurus and even possibly the biggest in the formation, the Mamenchisaurus. For the lower row, it's pretty simple. I just separate the one tooth that I have created and I just create the lower row. That's pretty much it. It's a bit boring, but it really makes the dinosaur look mean as for the carnivores. This has to be one of my favorite phases in the sculpt, because here I refine what I have created before, so in the blockout phase. So for example, for the feet, it is adding the fat pads and showing some bony landmarks so that the animal is a bit grounded. It isn't just a lumpy piece of meat. Same goes for the fingers, but on hands. So here the workflow is a bit more straightforward. I don't pull the fat pads to the side because there is no compression on them. So just clay strips does the thing. And then finally, I am really looking forward to this pretty much always, is the musculature. So for this, to ensure the best quality, I use musculoskeletal reconstructions by Matt Dempsey. He is a paleontologist and an artist, which is the best combination ever for me, because yes, it is scientifically accurate, but it also makes sense and is artistically pleasing. So here, mainly I am using draw brush, and I am using crease brush and clay strips, because I am not just drawing, this is 3D, and it's different parts have different volumes, right? So if I were to draw the, I don't know, some type of muscle, it's fine, it looks okay, but when you look from a different angle, right? If you look here, the chest muscles, they attach to the arm and to the coracoid. So now it just needs to kind of make sense. It's not that super simple. Yes, it takes practice, but it's very, very rewarding. For the arms, you know, it's pretty similar to human arms, but the thing is, it's a bit simple because there's no rotation in the wrist. It's just more straightforward. There's no like weird rotation happening. So here I am actually using some different techniques, so masking out and pulling out to give priority to different muscle groups. Pretty much it. Also join some parts together. Keeping muscles separate is just for the sake of convenience, so that I don't pull too much or too little. Then I get to adding lips. So according to the newest scientific research, theropods most likely had lips because the teeth need to be kept moist, and that's what lips do. Then the eye area, which is one of the trickiest to get because eyes are the gateway to the soul, but if dinosaurs had soul, that is a very different question for a very different video. When I join everything together and I remesh it, I start adding wrinkles using draw brush with some gravity turn on. So this animal would weigh around 3 tons, so above 6,000 pounds. It would be like 11 meters long, so there will be a lot of skin and fat sagging. So this is what you need to keep in mind. And as the last thing, I create the eyes so that the animal feels a bit more believable. Retopology, as my friend likes to call it, it's the unskippable quest of making 3D models. The workflow is not very difficult, it just can be a bit boring and mundane at times. So the main idea is, firstly, I create the loops around the most vital points, so legs, torso, tail, mouth, head. So another thing to keep in mind is that you should always go for an even amount of points or vertices on every loop. So I like to go for 10. 8 can be a little bit little, but it's up to you pretty much. So it's actually a good thing to understand anatomy pretty well, because it's just showing where the main forms are present. For the fingers on feet and hands, firstly I start kind of drawing the direction, finger points, and then I just add polygons around that finger. So same goes here, as I said, for the fingers on hand, just joining those loops together. As I said, it can be pretty boring, but it's a nice way to actually better your understanding of the forms. So another thing, yes, I am saying once again another thing, but it's pretty important that all of the polygons have a square-ish shape, because it kind of helps out with multi-resolution sculpting later on. And finally we get to the part which is pretty interesting and the most fun after creating the fundamentals. It's connecting all of the loops together. So here you can go a bit crazy, but you don't want to create too many triangles. It's fine as long as it's in the point where there isn't gonna be much movement, and the movement is gonna be created later on with the help of a skeleton, so a rig, but it's in the next chapter. The area around the lips and mouth, it's actually a good thing to add a lot of polygons in that area, because you might lose the shape a little bit, so definitely do not hesitate to add polygons there. And we are almost done. I quit the Retopo flow and I create or fill the areas in the nostrils and in the eye hole. Then I can project the high poly onto low poly to see if everything looks fine. And the UV unwrapping is pretty much a child's play. It is creating seams around previously created loops. If you pay close attention, you can see it, but there's just one small gimmick. It's just creating a line that goes through the limbs, as you can see right here, to have a nice unwrap. And it looks pretty good. As you can see, I'm just checking something, and then I create a test material to see if there's any stretching, and it appears I have done a pretty good job. Then I create a bunch of UDIM tiles. So the idea is that there's a bunch of images in one UV map. It helps a lot with conducting a lot of detail. So for context, maps or these images are put in an order parts of the body, such as head, neck, torso, etc. Everything here begins from one bone, the base bone. Then for the spine I create just one and extrude it until the head. If you want to have more flexion, then you just subdivide one bone and then you get two, and etc. And the most flexion would be around the neck. For the limbs, I separate the spine, and for the toes, I separate the bones of the leg. So pretty much all the time I keep a skeletal reference of the Yangchuanosaurus to keep in mind how many bones did this animal have. So yeah, one bone here for the wrist, and then copying exactly what I see in the reference for the fingers. Actually, what you need to keep in mind is the rotation of the bones. It's pretty important. Then I add a constraint which is called inverse kinematics, which allows one move to move a chain of bones. And for the legs, I add a pole which restricts the movement that the leg isn't going absolutely crazy. Then it's weight painting. The extra parts, which are teeth and toenails, are gonna get painted fully, so the influence is gonna be maximal, so red. And for the body, the transitions most of the time are required to be a bit smoother, like here. So the red is full movement of the mesh, and then blue is no movement of the mesh. Nothing too complicated, it just gets mundane. In order to make a relatively good weight paint, you need to put model in an extreme points, which can look a bit funny, but it's required. Like, I would have never figured out that there's some issue around the chest area. And yeah, just test some goofy poses, but the good thing about this process, you can make some badass renders after it. So the main idea behind this chapter is adding, you've guessed it, more and more details. I reproject all of the details done on the previous base sculpt via multi-resolution modifier and shrink wrap. Here I am redefining some of the wrinkles using crease brush, and I also lay foundation for scales using a standard brush with rake on it. So the main idea is just going around the main forms. That's how the skin would most likely behave on these scaly animals. Then I add some mass to the keratinous places that would be overgrown with keratin, and also some wrinkles around the eye area. Then I mask out the areas that I do not wish to be influenced by scales. And by the way, if you wanna use these scales, you can grab them from my Gumroad. They're pretty cheap. There's like 46, I think, brushes that I use in almost all of my projects now. So they work, basically. Check them out. If you are this far in this video, you're probably interested in it. So the philosophy here is basically putting scales according to this T-Rex face study, I think that's what it's called. So basically there will be, the larger scales will be present on the maxilla, so on that front of the head. But here I went a bit off script, let's say, and I made it in the style of some kind of dragon, maybe Chinese dragon. That's how I imagine Yangchuanosaurus to look like. So I also play around with different scales, so sometimes I put these rectangular in some places that would be more outstretched, and sometimes even conical, such as in that nostril area. Then I can also put a bunch of scales around the eyes. Then I use this special type of scales that I put on fingers, and I mask them out because later, as you will see, I will add a bunch of scales around so that the transition is a lot nicer. So I'm using hexagonal scales here. They feel to be the most fitting out of all. And then I use these outstretched PDMs for the feet. Next, I mask out the areas that I do not wish to be deformed, because here I put these microscopical scales on the head, because this would be a huge pain to put everything by hand. I have made one mistake that you will see soon. I am definitely not an advocate of putting all of the scales by hand, but some manual labor, as you could put it, is definitely a nice addition. Oh look, I think this is the scene from the intro that I have added. Anyways, I am putting some scales around that big scales area that is present in land-dwelling birds that live today, such as ostriches and cassowaries, I think. But it doesn't matter. You're here for the workflow. So I am adding these scales around the shoulder area, and this was the mistake that I have made. It was totally useless, but I think my mind has drifted away at that point, and I was just adding a bunch, hundreds upon hundreds of scales. But at the right time I realized this is not the way to do it, and I just masked this area out and I put these alphas around here. It doesn't look the best, but I think it fits alright to this area. Then I add even more scales on the feet. These are rather large scales, and I put a bunch of these wrinkles on the flappy part in the mouth and some gummy mass growing on the teeth. Then I put these generic scales on the body. These would be pretty small. I use standard brush with rake turned on. This is such a time saver. By the way, this information should be behind a paywall, but fuck it. Anyways, I am putting a bunch of these. This saves so much time, as I said before. Then I mask by cavity and use layer brush that helps out with, kind of bringing these scales to be a bit more realistic. And then I add some details to the claws as the last thing. My next step is bringing the FBX model to Substance Painter, so I proceed to bake all of the necessary texture maps such as curvature, normals, etc. Here I set up the base for the model. I decided to go with black first colors, and then I add some variations, so like some dirt that the dinosaur will be covered with, I don't know, some dead skin, etc, for some realism. Then I start to block out colors based on a whiptail blue lizard. I don't know, I really like the colors, but I don't like the way that it looks at me. Here I am generally using some very soft brushes so that I don't get too detailed just yet. I am mostly adding some gradual transitions here also, and the soft brush really helps with that. Then I proceed to add this detail based on Allosaurus from Dinosaur Revolution. I really love that design. And I decided to I should make it blue for some reason. I don't know, I like it. It fits the color. And actually the scales have the pigment, so in the areas where there are bigger scales there should be harsher transitions. At least that's what I noticed on reptiles. Here I am adding some secondary features such as some noise to those stripes. I've decided to make a better transition of the blues, because if I don't do it, your eyes will jump from head to tail and it's just a bit tiring and awkward. So I decided to add blue in the places where the stripes intersect and create closed spaces. So time to add some last resort details such as the blues showing under the black stripes. Well, if it isn't the last part here. I've decided to make a quick story. There's two Yangchuanosauruses, I think that's how you say it, fighting over territory. So also don't get confused, because I am using old skins here. These are pre-remaster of that skin. Here I am making some topography. There could be some river delta running with water around that time when the Yangchuanosaurus was around. Here I add an HDRI image for some realism, and I don't need to do so much work then. For the post-processing, I only add chromatic aberration. It adds that cool, colorful effect on edges. I also bring some textures from a free site like Polyhaven, and I use assets from Botanic, which is a paid add-on, so that I add some variety to the environment which these dinosaurs would walk around. It has some cool trees, it has like, I think 1,000 assets. It's totally worth getting. This project has been amazing, honestly. It took me around 20 days, I believe, but it's been super rewarding. If there's anything that you didn't understand or you'd like me to comment a bit more, tell me in the comments below. I'll try to talk about it in the next video, and if you have any suggestions, don't hesitate to tell me. I have a Discord, you can find the link in the description. See ya, bye!